Okay. More regulations. Yay. Okay. Yesterday we finished on FAR 91.169, and then on the topic of the 802 and 602 standard altitude minimums for your alternate. So if you're going to put an airport as an alternate, the weather on that airport has to be 802 for a non-precision approach and 602 for a precision approach. And this is to minimize the chances of weather below minimums when you use it as your alternate if you need it. And then if you want to look out for this symbol on your approach plate, and that means that that airport specifically has non-standard minimums if you want to use it as an alternate. So you go to the front of the booklet, or you look up the information on your iPad, and then you'll see the minimums that you're going to need for that if you want to use that, in this case, mobile regional as an alternate. So they usually, maybe they have like mountainous terrain around it, and they have 1,000 feet of ceiling. It's usually more than 802 or 602. 91.171 is the VOR equipment check, and this is the one that talks about that you're required to have a VOR check every 30 days if you're planning to use that aircraft or on an IFR flight plan, or for using it with IFR operations. (173) talks about, let me see, look it up. Where are you? 173. ATC clearance and flight plan required. Let me pull it up. Trying to reduce glare, and I end up messing it up. Okay. You can operate in control airspace under IFR unless you have filed a flight plan, an IFR flight plan, and received the clearance. (175) when you are required to use an instrument let down from your en route structure, you are required to use official documentation unless you have submitted your own homemade, Jaime Luque Regional Airport approach and submitted it, to the FAA. It's like, and tell them, like, hey, I want to use this because, I saw that it was safe, and they authorize you. You can't use it unless you're authorized. If you're going to be operating on IFR, under IFR. And don't go below the MDA. What's that? Minimum descent altitude or decision altitude. Unless you can use a normal rate of descent using normal maneuvers. So that's usually what we consider normal, is the 3-degree angle with the descent rate to your airplane. At the speed that you shoot an approach at 3 degrees, set like 400 feet per minute on your VSI, like 400, 500, yeah, between 4 and 5. You want to do that. Flight visibility is no less than the one prescribed for the approach being used. So that one's a little tricky, to see, like, in-flight visibility. It's like, oh, see, yeah, I can see, a mile down. Really, can you really tell? Or you're trying to transition from inside the cockpit to outside. So that's why we have the third one. You need to have inside at least one of these: the approach light system, the threshold. You see the threshold. Let me fix that. The threshold markings, the lights, the runway end indicator lights, the VASI on the side, the touchdown zone, or the markings, the lights of the touchdown zone, where you can see the runway. Don't go below those altitudes unless you have the airport environment specifically, in front of the runway. You're not allowed to go under the MDA. If you get to that point, execute misapproach. And we can see that on 175. And those are the minimums for takeoff. That's usually for, under part 121, 125, 129, and 135. You're flying 191. You're flying part 91. There's no, minimums. You can take off, 0, 0. I'm not going to say it's smart. You can do it. It's just not smart. You have the minimum altitudes for IFR operations. You can't operate lower than the minimum altitudes in instrument publications. So you have a minimum en route altitude, you stick to that one. And then unless ATC, vectors you to a different altitude, they have minimum vector altitudes that are usually below the MEA. So don't be surprised if they show you it's like descent, certain altitude, and you see that on your chart they have you have it's below the MEA. That's because they're using minimum vector altitudes. You can find those out there online. If you want to see them, you're not required, to get familiar with them. But if you're curious, on why those guys are vectoring you to those altitudes, just for peace of mind and situational awareness, you can do that too. And the minimum, if it's not charted, and then the altitude is 1,000 feet above, 1,000 feet AGL, above the highest obstacle, and 2,000 above if you're on a mountainous area. I saw a couple of questions on the FAA questions that we have that relate to that. So pay attention. We can take a peek. The horizontal distance would be 4 nautical miles. So it's 2,000 feet, 4 nautical miles, 1,000 feet, 4 nautical miles. As pilot in command, operating under IFR, you're required to monitor continuously the frequency that you are working on. Let's check out this specific PAC of each aircraft under IFR and in control airspace must ensure that a continuous watch is maintained on the appropriate frequency and must report the following as soon as possible. Time and altitude of passing each designated reporting point. On forecast weather and information regarding safety of flight. This is really short one.
Does that mean that you can't have a single radio? You'd have to have dual radios for that so that you can bleed over if you were trying to pick up the weather at a certain airport?
No, you just tell them that you're going to step out. Step out and then check back in. But you're required to, keep monitoring. Because I've flown with just one radio on very busy airspace, down there in Columbus, and you just tell them, it's like, I'm going to take, it is standby, I'll be back, and you get that information. But you check that and you come back, and everything is recorded, so. In case you have loss of communication, under 91.185, you can check it out right now. That's the wording here, so we can understand it and visualize it. Regarding your route, you're going to either follow your assigned route. If you were an assigned one and they start vectoring you, you're going to follow that. Or if he's giving you an expected time to be at a certain fix, you're going to comply with that. And then if not, on your route, you're going to go as filed if you lose radios. So that's what they're going to be monitoring. Regarding altitude, you're going to maintain your minimum en route altitude, or your assigned altitude, or your expected altitude. If you have the if the limit of your clearance is the point where you're going to start an instrument approach, you want to start that at the time of, that they said, expect further clearance. And you arrive to your destination as close to your ETA. And remember, at this point, I think it's expected that you're going to have 7600 on your transponder. They don't have radio, so they're keeping track of you. You're not pressurized. So if you're going to be more than 30 minutes above 12,500, you need to have, the pilot needs to have supplemental oxygen. You need to have oxygen anytime you go above 14,000, and then your passengers need to have oxygen anytime above 15,000. That's part 91. When you get to your commercial, getting ready for your commercial check ride, then you get familiar with this. And that's the same that's on that chart. Then the NTSB rule, that's regarding accidents. So 830.2, that's the definitions. So that tells you, that anytime you require, or someone involved in an accident, the definition for a serious injury is that it requires hospitalization for more than 48 hours, results in the fracture of a bone, except simple fractures of like the finger, toes, or your nose, causes severe hemorrhages, nerve, muscle, or tendon damage, involves any internal organ, involves second or third degree burns, then substantial damage that would require major repair or replacement of the component, any engine failure, bent fairings, scowling, dented skin, puncture holes, ground damage to rotor or propeller blades. In an accident, the definition of an accident is any occurrence which any person suffers death or serious injury, or in which the aircraft receives substantial damage, in according to their definition of substantial damage and the types of injury. Then an incident means that an occurrence other than an accident associated with the operation of an aircraft which affects or could affect the safety of operation has taken place. You need to notify the NTSB on Regulation 830.5. That's immediate notification. If you have any of these incidents: flight control system malfunction or failure, inability of a crew member to perform his duties, failure of structural components of a turbine engine, in-flight fire, and mid-air collisions. Anytime you damage property, you're required as well. Point 10, that's the preservation of aircraft wreckage. So it is your job to protect the wreckage of everything associated until the NTSB arrives. Don't move anything, or allow other people to, take things from the site. And then point 15, that's the reports and statements to be filled. The operator must file a report within 10 days after an accident, or 7 days if an overdue aircraft is still missing. And I think that's about it on the FARs. Have fun.